Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I am trying to figure out what I want to actually say in this video. I've been thinking about making this video for a while, and I just feel like it is very difficult to sort of grasp what your author voice is. I don't know the special sauce that gets you there. I really don't. So I'm kind of just going to talk off the rip here. I don't really have anything planned. Usually I have a little notes that I want to hit on each point. But yeah, I think I'm just going to talk for like 20 minutes about author voice and we'll see what it is. This might not be posted, but um, but I don't really know how to like tell somebody like with certainty, this is how you find your author voice. I don't know. Also, it is very humid, but I have turned off my AC because it was like in the 70s last week. But today on Saturday, it seems to be wanting to be 85 degrees, according to my computer. So I have a fan on that's like over there, over there. So hopefully this won't mess up the audio. It's pretty far away, so I think it's going to be all right. But let's continue. So, finding your author voice. I have been reading a lot more this year. That was one of my goals for 2025 was to read 24 books. I think I'm up to about 15, maybe 14 or 15, something like that. So, I may or may not make um 24 unless I decide to like, cheat a little bit and read some novellas instead. But we'll see. Anyway, so I've been reading a lot more and I've been thinking a lot about how I found my author voice. And if you are a younger writer, not necessarily in age, but when I say younger writer, I mean somebody who is young to the process of writing. It's not necessarily how old you are, but it's more like how long you've been writing. So, if you're a younger writer, you may not have fully developed your author voice. And I personally feel that there is no special sauce to help somebody get to their true author voice. It's more like you know what you don't want to do. So, author voice is not your POV, okay? It's not first person, it's not third person omniscient, it's not third person close, it's not even second person. Second person had a moment back in the 90s with a few books, and I think it was Visit from the Goon Squad was the last book I read that had a very distinct second person in one of its chapters. If you've ever read that book, there's some experimental stuff going on, and there is one whole chapter that is just second person. And second person kind of fell out of favor. I don't see it that much anymore, but it is good for immediacy if you want to pull somebody into the immediacy of a moment. And also there were a lot of literary journals that were just like, do not send second person. We are over it. So it kind of fell out of favor. Maybe it'll come back. Who knows? But that is not author voice. Author voice is also not necessarily the genre that you write in. And whether it's horror or science fiction or fantasy or literary, that's not your author voice. To me, author voice is your style, how you choose to describe your setting, your characters, the actions, their emotions. It's how you string sentences together. It's the verbs that you use. It's the adjectives that you use. It's when you choose to make chapter breaks, if you do chapter breaks at all. There are some authors who are famous for not doing chapters. What was the book I read that didn't have chapters? I think it was Cemetery of Untold Stories by Julia Alvarez. Didn't have chapters. I don't think Celeste Ng used chapter breaks either in her book I read this year. So there's a lot of literary people that don't do chapters, but there are literary people who do chapters. So it's all of that combined. It's the choices that you make as a writer to tell your story. So how I found my author voice is kind of a hit or miss thing. When I first started writing, way back, way back, I thought I was going to be a YA author. You know, back in the 90s, YA was not what it is now. The selection was tiny. I mean, literally, it was like Sweet Valley High and Fear Street and Christopher Pike and like a few other people, and that was it. So it's no wonder that I read that stuff, and then when I hit like, I don't know, 13 or 14, I started reading like adult books because I was like, I've read everything here, you know? So I think I read a couple more Christopher Pikes, but really by the time I was like 16, I wasn't reading it anymore. But that's what I was writing. I was writing about teenagers because I was a teenager. And that's what I thought I would do. And then I got to college and they kind of encouraged us to write more literary. And so, the YA stuff that I had read was more fantasy and horror. And I was pretty much like, or mystery, Nancy Drew was big too. And so I started writing literary stuff. And then as I moved into my young adulthood of getting out of college, I started trying to write more literary style. I was a fan of like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. So I thought I was going to be a mystery writer. I thought I was going to write detective fiction. And that didn't happen. I ended up instead writing a very weird story. And it was the first story that I wrote that I really felt captured exactly what I wanted to say. I had hit some hits and misses. In fact, I wrote a story when I was a junior in college. And it's really funny because I still have a copy of that story. It's called The Dress. And my professor at the time, she wrote in the margins, this just all seems a bit magical to me. And the number one critique, yeah, comment that people made about that dress when we did our workshop, because for those of you who don't know, if you take more academic, rigorous workshops, they have you sit around and you submit your story to everybody in your class, and then everybody says what they like and what they don't like about your story. And the one comment people said over and over again was, this feels like Cinderella. It feels like a fairy tale. And now when I look back, I just laugh. I laugh and laugh because I was like, yeah, even then, like my magical realism fantasy was trying to like get out, you know? Even though I was dampering it down, it still kept showing up in my regular schmegular literary work. So clearly when I got out of school and I wasn't in class and I wasn't writing to a class, I was just writing what interested me. I thought I would be more Raymond Chandler-esque, but I wasn't. I was more kind of like the fantasy books that I had read as a teenager, but then I didn't want to write about teenagers. I wanted to write about grown-ups. And that was kind of how my style was forged. As I got older and I got more confident and I started to think about more like the theme that I wanted to talk about and use the story as sort of a metaphor for those themes and explore topics that interested me. I've talked about this before, but I really like talking about ethics. I really like talking about people who have to choose between what is right and what is easy. I like the idea of something I heard once on TV, which was ethics are what you do when nobody's watching and who you are at the core. I also tend to do a lot of family saga stuff. Um, so those were kind of the themes I wanted to explore. But I also really liked these sort of fantastical elements in sort of everyday life. There's a reason why surrealism is my favorite type of art. I like the blurriness of it. It's real life, but it's real life through a sort of a blurred lens is my favorite. But Raymond Chandler did not completely become forgotten. I didn't just say, "Oh, I'm not doing that no more." I liked his stark, sort of frank way that he described things. I really liked how when he would describe actions, there was no pulling punches. There was no real purple language. It was more like he smashed into the door instead of he heaved himself against the door with all his might. No, I like the first way. He smashed into the door. That gets it across much quicker and much more immediate. And so I learned something from those detective fiction books, and I still read them from time to time. I think I read almost every single Raymond Chandler book, but there's still plenty of other ones that are great. And but I like that immediacy and the simplest simplicity of the language, that they don't waste time with like a lot of ornate descriptions. They just pick one or two words that really get the meaning behind it. So you don't have to work to figure out what's going on in the scene or what's going on with the character. And instead, you are just reading the page. And I'd like to believe that I still do that with a lot of my writing, which is why I tend to write pretty short things, like short stories. But it took me a while to find that voice. It took me a while to be confident and to trust that that voice would show up when I would sit down. I don't think it happens in like some magical moment. I think it happens through writing a lot of things without really thinking about, what influences you or whether or not you're doing it right. It just comes from reading a lot of stories, a lot of different kinds of stories. Everybody told me when I graduated from college, read widely and read everything. Don't just read one genre or that genre. Read every genre. And I think when I show what my reading list was for this year in December, we'll do a video just solely based on my reading. You all can see that like I read just about everything from every genre, and I still do that. I really love doing that because there's some books that I don't know I'm going to like it until I try. So finding your author voice is about reading widely, learning from all different kinds of writers, and then writing what matters to you, writing things you care about. I know that there are people who are going to take that to mean don't write to a market. But in my experience, the people who write to a market write to that market because they really care about it. Romance is a huge, huge part of the publishing world. And the people who really love romance and really love writing it are going to find their author voice with that. And the people who are just writing it for a paycheck, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to feel authentic. I don't have that mindset though, so I can't really speak on it. I just feel like, why would you write something that you half-assed, even if it's something that's going to pay you a lot of money? I don't know if I would necessarily enjoy that. And I don't know, there's so many other alternatives besides writing, um, even writing in romance. Um, so I don't think that just because you have a passion for something and it happens to be popular, that means it's wrong. That's what I'm trying to get across. And I think the people that try to do that usually fail. Like I've heard some people are doing AI for short stories, and I'm like, why? Most people who are writing short stories, myself included, are writing those short stories because we love them, not because we think it's going to make us famous or rich or something. I mean, dang, most people don't really read books. Did you all read that article? It came out 2 weeks ago, a week ago, something like that. That said, like, the reading public is down like 40% now, in America at least. So a lot of people are not reading books, and even less are reading short stories. So I figure if you're gonna try to make yourself rich, you probably should go into AI or something. Writing short stories is not it. It is not it, ladies and gentlemen. Um, However, just because it's not going to make you rich doesn't mean it isn't fun. And I have fun. Speaking of which, I did actually finish a short story not too long ago, like today's Saturday. So I finished it on Monday, which was a holiday. And I was just determined to finish that story. And I did about 9 o'clock at night. And I haven't not mailed it out yet. I do have to submit something this week for submission September. But I didn't write it because I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to make a lot of money with that. I wrote it because I was excited to write it and because it's really fun. It's it's a little creepy though, but it's a fun story. And I honestly don't know if I could have written that story, 20 years ago, but here we are. So I think that your author voice just comes from experience. It comes from writing things you care about, things you're excited to write about. And I also think your author voice is ever evolving. It does not stop. If you keep writing and you keep reading, your author voice will just become more and more authentic. I don't actually think that you can not develop your own author voice if you keep reading and you keep writing. I definitely think you can regress though if you stop reading and you stop writing. It's like starting up a car. If your car's been sitting for a few years, you try and start it up, well, your battery may be dead or your starters may be shot or the spark plugs are bad or your gas is bad or something. And it may take a while to kind of get it up and running. But if you're driving your car every day, you're doing the maintenance and stuff, it's going to work. So writing is like that. Doesn't mean necessarily that you have to write every day. I certainly don't write every day, but I do try to write most days of the week. And I do think, and this is probably just turning into author habits video too, but I'll get back to voice, I swear. I told you I wasn't scripting this out. Um, but I did just want to say, even if you only have an hour a week, if you make an appointment with yourself to write, then that is what you can do. I know that there's a bunch of people that feel like, oh, you should write every day. I don't think that's necessarily terrible advice, especially to get into the habit of writing. But I do think if you miss a day or two, or even like three or four, it's not the end of the world. What is the end of the world is if you decide that since you've missed all those days, well, then I might as well just skip, the next month or two. That's bad. Don't do that. Um, if you miss a few days, just get back on the horse or just say to yourself, you know what? My day job is crazy and I have zero time. So Saturday morning at 10 a.m. to noon, that's when I'm going to work on my writing. And you make that appointment with yourself and you keep it. And so what if you're only writing one day a week? You're consistent. And as I've said before, consistency will save your career. It's better to be consistent than to be sort of beating yourself up because you don't write every day. So what? You write every week. There you go. All right, so back to author voice. Your author voice is definitely something that comes from writing a lot and reading widely, but it also comes from trusting yourself. The more you write, the more you will trust yourself and your voice. And that is a really great growth step as you as an artist. You have to believe that you're going to get there. You're going to get there. And I know it's hard. We all have the imposter syndrome. I definitely have it. But I also have learned over these years that I'm going to get there. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be razzle dazzle, the genius writer. It's not going to be that, but it is going to be real and it is going to be authentic. And that's something I can work with. So when you're trying to find your author voice, my best advice is to write things you care about and then trust that that voice is going to develop. It is a deal that you make with your inner muse. It is something that you make with the writing gods, if they exist. Who knows? But I think that it does have to show up. Your trust has to be there. If you don't trust yourself to write, it's going to make it harder for you to be authentic. I think authenticity and trust go hand in hand, whether it's you trusting me as the audience member and the creator, or you trusting yourself. Trust and authenticity come hand in hand. So if you want to have that authentic author voice, you have to trust yourself. Read widely, excuse me, and and write a lot and trust yourself to get where you need to go creatively. Well, that turned into quite the inspirational rah, 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 but I hope that it helped. Um, we're in the middle of September, and like I said, I have to submit something, so I'm going to end this video right there because I need to do my writing stuff. I did everything else this morning: grocery store, laundry, finished my book. But now it's time for me to get on the writing. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. Please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you all on the next video. Bye.